Welcome to First Alarm Family First. I'm Jen Herrera alongside Carolyn Acosta. And while this is a show for everybody, I will say, Carolyn, it's always really nice to highlight people down here in South Florida who are on the same journey that we're on.
100%. And today our guest is a retired Miami-Dade Police Sergeant JC Prellezo. He worked for 28 and a half years in law enforcement. Like so many in this field, he faced some intense pressures and trauma and emotional tolls that come with the job. Over time, those challenges led him down a path of alcoholism and the reality that many first responders do face. JC, thank you for being with us here today. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here. You're both my sisters because I know that your husband Jen is in the fire service, and of course you with Alex, and so you're both my sisters, right? And I don't take that lightly. And so a little bit about me: I did 28 and a half years with Miami-Dade Police at the time, now the Sheriff's Office. I did 10 years of road patrol as an officer. I was a sergeant for 18 and a half years. My specialty was canine. I loved hunting for bad guys. My wife always asked me, "Hey, do you miss it?" And I always laugh and I go, "Not at all. If I could be in a backyard searching for a bad guy, just me and the dog, yes, I do. But I don't miss all the other stuff that came with it." I did undercover stuff, crime suppression team sergeant, where we did a multitude of stuff from buying and selling narcotics, prostitution, trafficking, sex trafficking, all that kind of stuff. Shift commander, where I was in charge of notifying the mayor, the director, and so a multitude of stuff. And I had a very good career. I had a great file, no blemishes and stuff. So I'm very grateful,
JC, when you give us that laundry list, right? You're like prostitution, sex trafficking, canine, searching for bad guys. It always amazes me how firefighters and police officers, they just kind of do their punch list, right? But we all know there's so much more to it. There's so much behind it. We turn those things into a punch list just naturally based on our career and what we do every day. With what you experienced with all of those things, you decided to publicly come out and start talking about the traumas associated with that job. You started 3 a.m. Fog. For anybody who doesn't know, what is 3 a.m. Fog and where did that name come from?
So look, I think it's important to outline the fact that I brought stuff to the dance, meaning I had a total dysfunctional childhood, right? Mm-hmm. My mom, because of the death of my 12-year-old brother, and we're all parents here, we would know how tragic and horrible that is. She was a manic depressant after that, and I had constant suicide attempts. That's how I grew up. Mm-hmm. And so when I talk to guys from fire, I tell them, you guys were the ones when I was a little kid, I would ride in the truck with you guys. So you guys have been taking care of me since I was a baby, right? So 3 a.m. Fog, there came a point in my career where I just lost myself, right? Earlier in my life, I was never a big drinker. As I started in the police department, we would go to Cameos and Disco Inferno, right? And we worked midnight shift. The whole squad would go to the beach and we go get a cab, and we started drinking and little by little, and I know that now looking back, I started to go down the road of using alcohol to numb some of my pain. As a child, I used food, right? Mm-hmm. So eventually, I lost my stuff and I became a functional alcoholic and just drinking, right? So 3 a.m. Fog, the way it came about was when I was in the worst part of that alcoholism, it was really weird. And I'm a big guy, a big follower of Jesus, right? So in that time when I was so dark, I would wake up, God would wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, like on a dot, like if I had set the alarm. I would roll out of bed, even if I had just blacked out at 1 o'clock in the morning. And so at 3 o'clock in the morning, I would roll out of bed and there was a mirror right there. And I just felt the presence of God saying, look at yourself, look at what you're doing, right? And that always stuck with me. For the last year, I drank for 3 years every day, right? Wow. That last year was horrible and a lot of blackouts, but every night I would wake up at that time And it was like I knew that there was a reason and a purpose, because even if I had planned to do that, I couldn't do it on my own. So at 3 o'clock, I would wake up, and that always stuck with me. I would look in the mirror and I was inebriated and I couldn't really see myself well. And so that fog that you have when you're drinking, it's a very vicious cycle. And that's how I came up with that name.
Was there a particular event or time in your life that pushed you towards alcohol?
Look, going to therapy, I realized that at that point I have one child, my son, who is the greatest gift that God could ever give me. And when I started drinking, he was about a year old. And for some reason, and the therapist explained to me the connection of my mom and my relationship with her and what we meant to each other. When I had my son, for some reason, that was just like the little trigger to set things off, and I remember telling my wife, like, how did I get here? It wasn't like, oh, you've been a drunk, or I just one day how did I get here? And so there was a mechanism there. And that's what I tell a lot of the guys that, and we'll get into the suicide with the 16-year-old girl that I handled. That really was my PTSD flashback and just a nightmare. But there was a link between that girl's suicide and my mother.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to a PTSD retreat, which is where I got diagnosed, there was a relationship there that the men and women have to understand. It's not just seeing the dead baby or getting in a shooting or whatever. Yeah, those things are horrible, but we are super resilient and we're able to process that. Where it gets extremely dangerous is where there's a connection, a personal connection.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I started drinking after the birth of my son, but he also was the mechanism that God put into my life, the gift to make me want to live,
I think that backstory, and we'll get into it more, is hugely important. And Carolyn and I have discovered this. And having these conversations, this is by no means an attack on any career first responder related. Definitely not the fire service, because I'm the product of a firefighter and I'm married to a firefighter. Carolyn would say the same thing. They're amazing careers. It just comes with the trauma. And oftentimes, JC, like you alluded to, it's past trauma that for some reason is indeed triggered by something that's seen while you're working. You talked about your wife. You talked about having conversations with your wife. We make a huge effort to get the spouses involved because they tend to be on the front lines with their first responders. How hands-on was your wife? Did she have to kind of shake you and be like, hey, babe, we're doing something? Did she kind of stand back a little bit? Because sometimes we're not sure what questions to ask and what roles to play.
So look, I've heard you guys talk about this and other guests and stuff. And yeah, there's an aspect of, look, I don't want to tell you, right? I love you and I don't want to tell you what I saw, right? But there's also an aspect of, and I'm not saying this in a disrespectful way, you have no idea, right? You weren't there. Like, I have no idea as an anchor like you were on the news, the pressures that you have, right? I don't know. And you may come home and tell me, oh, honey, today the camera's shut off and this and that. I'm like, big deal, right? And so I'll give you an example. There was I was in Canine, and there was a big shooting at Kings Creek down by Dadeland, where a partner of mine, or a classmate from my academy, the guy next to him who was an observer got shot. My partner got almost his leg completely blown off. There were a gay couple that were killed and another lady that was shot. And so we had a sniper scenario like at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And they called me on the radio and whatever. There was a long things, but I remember getting home and we were newly married. And I told my wife, I turned on the light. It was 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, and I go, "Oh my God, Carlos got shot." I said, "Oh yeah, apaga la luz, turn off the light." She didn't do it because she's an idiot. She didn't do it because she didn't care. She didn't live it. And so I said, okay, shut that, and I'll just internal grenade. I'll swallow that, good to go, and move on, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing. And yes, I didn't want to get into, and I still, sometimes I'll talk about certain things. Yeah, I don't want to tell you the stuff that I saw. I don't. I need you to be well for me, and I don't want to take you down that road.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? And so there's different aspects, right? There's two answers there for you.
Yeah. No, honest answers. I love it.
Yeah. And I think this is what we're doing, is bringing more light, especially for the wives at home. We don't know, and then we don't say anything, or we say something or don't, really put too much into it and kind of blow it off, but it's eye opening.
Yeah.
What was a wake up call for you when you decided something needed to change?
Huh. Um, it's funny. About 2 weeks ago, I found out that Alex was one of my Emmaus brothers, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, and we have a lot of mutual friends. And so I was at this guy's house, and we had talked about that. But through God working the way that He works, lots of circles to get a straight path, I ended up at the worst time of my life being invited to go to the Emmaus retreat, right?
Mm,
And I remember a good friend of mine contacted my wife and goes, "Look, I don't think he's doing well. This would be great for him."
mm,
And at that point, I was so lost and so desperate and scared, right? When I hear people commit suicide, the first thing that comes into my mind is, Pobrecito, this guy was so scared, because I was scared.
mm.
And we were packing my bag on my bed, and my wife goes, "What do you want from this?" And I said, "I need a miracle."
Wow, I remember that day. I dropped off Alex.
Yeah.
Guys, what is the MAS?
The Emmaus retreat is based on a verse in the Bible where Cleopas and his brother are walking, and they're like, "Hey, let's go see this guy that we hear he's Jesus, right?" And they're like, "You haven't heard about this guy?" And so while they're in their walk to Emmaus, which is a place, some guy appears randomly to them and says, "Hey, where are you going?" They're like, "Man, what do you mean, where are we going? We're gonna go see this guy Jesus. This guy's like been healing people, and he's the funk, he's the guy, let's go." Little did they know, and it's, I'm paraphrasing, but little did they know that that was Jesus that had appeared to them, right? And so this world of trauma, addiction, and alcohol, you need faith in your life.
Mm-hmm.
If you told me, what do you need? I'll tell you the very first thing is faith. And when you go to AA meetings or NA meetings, a belief in a higher power as you see it, right? There's no indoctrination. You can think whatever you want. You can be Muslim. You can be whatever. But you have to believe in a higher being than you. Yeah, a lot of your answers, and I'll tell you, a lot of your answers is looking in the mirror, looking at yourself. And sometimes that is extremely difficult for us, whether you're a man or a woman. But the answers, you have to surrender. And it wasn't until, when I was ready and thinking very, very adamantly about committing suicide, where I knelt down and I said, "Hey, if you're this God that everybody says, I can't do this anymore. I really can't." I was ready to go. I was done. And that was it. And it was that day that God said, "Okay, now you'll listen." And yeah, I'll listen. And at that point, look, I had overdose on drugs too, and I've talked about that. I was doing painkillers when I got off of alcohol. I always said I was chasing the high, and I've learned through therapy I was running from voids.
Mm-hmm.
And so faith is extremely important. You had Mono Blanco, my buddy, last week, and he's one of my Emmaus brothers too. And what I learned was, when I went to this Emmaus retreat, I didn't want to talk. I didn't want you to know about me. I didn't want to share myself. And when I got there, I realized we're all the same. You have a little more of this, I have a little more of that, but we're all the same.
And God loves you.
Yeah, and God loves you regardless.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't love me.
Right.
And that was the key thing. He loved me even when I didn't love myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important.
At church on Sunday, one of the messages was that we have to pray with anticipation, not expectation.
Yeah.
And that just reminded me of that. Like,
Yeah.
don't expect things, but anticipate the good stuff.
Yeah.
You found leadership in your faith through Jesus Christ. Let's talk about leadership within the departments. How important is that, JC, when it comes to all these words awareness, stigma, blah, 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 all these words we are throwing out? Where does leadership step in that?
Okay, so look, I'm gonna talk, and I'm not bashing anybody, because it's very important that when we deliver our messages, myself and you guys, like I don't want to talk to these women. They're gonna bash me. This is not what it's about. It's about getting better. We have to learn how to get better, right? And so, look, I talked about in my video this morning on the podcast that somebody had sent me a Facebook conversation between somebody and Captain Gustin, who we lost recently, where they said, "Look, I'm about to retire. Hey, Captain, when are you retiring?" His response was, "When they kick me out because I got nothing else." Do you need a bigger red flag, right? This is a job, and I understand it's a job that is not normal. It's very unique, but times are changing, and this bringing our job home. And yes, I always have to be armed when I was working, and I still am as I'm retired. Things happen, but we have to dedicate ourselves to being a father, a sibling, a husband. I'm not a cop when I'm walking the hallways of my house. You're not a firefighter. Yeah, great if the grill goes crazy, you know what to do, but you're not a firefighter at home. And so a lot of times, we come home and we didn't take off that mask. We have a lot of masks as men, right? And so sometimes we come home and we're still that sergeant barking orders. And I'm still trying to take control of stuff. And your wife just wants you to put chlorine in the pool, take out the garbage. Hey, the dog took a shit. You got to take him outside. And I'm thinking of still taking control of stuff. So the leadership issue is huge. I've worked for tremendous leaders, and I've worked for a lot of leaders that were garbage, right? And we need better leadership. Like right now, what I was talking about this morning was, okay, we're going to go to to Captain Gustin's funeral, and there's going to be mayors and commissioners, right? And the chief's going to be there, who I know is a good guy. And, okay, we're going to cry, right? Raise some money, do some stuff. And then what? What are we doing? Waiting for the next guy? Waiting for the next girl? What are you doing to change it? I don't have the power here. I have a voice, and I'll tell you the real deal, whether you want to hear it or not. But you have the power. So as a leader, what are you doing? And I've got tons of firefighter friends, and they're like, "Look, we don't need a poster, a T-shirt." The other day I got a phone call as somebody went to the 988 number or whatever it is, and they were put on hold, right? And their wife was next to them, and she couldn't believe it. These are things where we have to be better, but you only get there when you actually care. If it's a world of fluff, then say what it is, and you shouldn't be in that position. When I became a sergeant, I know that I gave up a piece of myself to be there for you. But that's something that I was very aware of. I didn't do it for me. I didn't want to, I'm a sergeant. No, I did it because I got screwed over as an officer, and I said, I'm not going to let other people do that, to other people. So leadership is key. It's 100% key.
What do you think needs to change within police and fire to truly support mental health for the first responders?
But one of the biggest problems that we have, and I knew about it, but I didn't know it was this big of a deal because, again, I'm in contact from people from Los Angeles to NYPD. It's workplace toxicity. And the other day I posted a little story if you have, and I know, Jen, I think you have 2 daughters or 3 daughters, whatever, and if they're bickering, which is normal because you live together in confined spaces and that's going to happen, that's normal. But if they're throwing bottles at each other and your husband and you are not doing anything about it, you're the problem.
So that's not normal to happen in my house? I'm just kidding. We haven't gotten to that point. I'm kidding.
Yeah. But, mom and dad have to take control of the house. Yeah. And so we have people that don't want to go to work. I had somebody recently reach out to me that was involved in a murder-suicide. And I go, did anybody go talk to you guys? Yeah, they came out. They never made eye contact. They didn't want to talk to me. And so since she was full of shit, I didn't tell her nothing.
Right.
And so, again, it goes back to leadership, compassion, honesty. And look, I don't want to go to homicide and deal with a bunch of bodies. I got to the point that I had seen so many dead people. I didn't want to do that, but I do want to help people. And so I like to talk to people. Yeah. And you want to cry? I'll hug the hell out of you and we'll cry together. And I'll tell you my story and so forth. And we'll go from there. But you got to want to do that. And, the fluff job is not going to cut it.
You have to want to share. You have to want to open up. You mentioned the suicide of a 16-year-old girl. That was kind of one of your main turning points. JC, do you mind sharing that story? Because someone who's watching this, it could help them.
Yeah, sure. So I already had taken my promotional exam. So my sergeant, who was a great leader, said, look, I'm the acting lieutenant. You be the acting sergeant. You handle the squad. So you got experience. So, one of my public service aide called me to an apartment called Horizons West in Kendall and says, "Look, there's something weird here. I came to take a stolen auto report, but the keys are missing and they don't know what's going on." And so I said, "Okay, who else is in the house?" "Well, my daughter." "Where is she?" "In the room." "Go get her. Let's talk to her." It was a Colombian family, right? And so they go to get her. She goes, "Man, my daughter's not in the room, but she left this letter on the pillow." So I read it. "I'll be by the water and the trees." The kicker was that morning, and for younger people, they won't know, but there was a store called Bird Eyes, which was Macy's, and she had been arrested that morning for shoplifting. It was a petty thing. They were able to sign her out. She went home. So they told her, "Go to your room." When she went to the room, she wrote that letter. She apparently was able to get the keys and leave. Long story short, the next day, one of her girlfriends says, "Hey, look," called the station and said, "We found her cell phone." I said, "Take me to where you found her cell phone." When we get there, I could see the marks on the canal bank, and I look inside the canal, and there's a car, right? So, by the book, called the divers the whole 9 yards, and to this day, I remember the diver coming up saying, "Single white female lying prone in the backseat of the car," right? And it was a 16-year-old girl who took her life like that. And I'll be honest with you, it was sad, it was tragic, horrible. But I remember, we got her out of the canal, inventoried her body and all the stuff. The Emmy was there, all the news channels were there, and I went about my life. I just did. Just back there, put it in the Rolodex, and moved on. Little did I know, she was going to be a huge part of my life. And my wife, who's a licensed therapist, remember for 10 years, I thought I was having memories and I was having flashbacks. She was a part of my life. And I remember being in the pool, and my wife apparently had been trying to talk to me. She's like, "Earth to JC, Earth to JC." And I could hear my wife, but I was with this girl. And I could see her smile, beautiful girl. And she goes, "Man, where were you?" And I was like, and I remember vividly going, "Oh my God, that's not right. Something's wrong." For 10 years, I did that. And again, the Miami Dade Fire Rescue came through. My union didn't want anything to do with this. But a lot of the guys who are still working there that are my brothers, we went on a PTSD retreat to Tampa. We had a week of therapy, and then we did EMDR. And it was there that I noticed, and I was told by the doctor, that the reason that this girl had been in my life for so long was she was a female and she was helpless, like my relationship with my mother. When my mother would try to kill herself and I was young, I remember trying to give my mom CPR when I was like 10 years old. No child should have to do that, right? And so that's why. And she goes, and I cried and I sobbed and I cried. She goes, "You mourned her death and she will never bother you." And unless I have to remember her, like, for stories or interviews, she never bothered me again. But that was a telltale sign of PTSD and the good thing about EMDR.
JC, if a first responder is listening right now and is afraid to ask for help, what would you say to them?
Stop eating shit, right?
Yeah.
Macho. I have to be macho. Like I tell people, I go, "Listen, I'll cry and I'll sob and I'll whoop your ass anyway," because that doesn't make, vulnerability is where you allow to help other people. Um, you just have to do that. Stop playing games. I tell these people, this whole facade of caring what you think about me and the next guy, I don't care what anybody thinks about me. What I care is being there for my son.
Mm-hmm.
Having something else, someone else. JC, I asked this question to a retired firefighter up in the West Coast, Doug White, who a lot of his stories are similar to yours as far as having the suicidal thoughts. He was in his squad car. He talks about this openly. He had a gun in his hand. Why do you think the Doug Whites of the world, you, are able in those moments to not follow through with what you thought you had planned?
Listen, it's scary. I have caught a ton of homicide guys. I've been involved in shootings, all kinds of stuff. There was nothing more scary to me than blacking out and finding myself in a dark place. I mean, there are things that I have never talked about. Only my MAS guys under very strict confidentiality because it's crazy. You know, spiritual attacks are 100%, real, and I tell people, my wife and I recently have been talking about it because it was a big murder suicide. And, when you do an area canvas on a homicide and you go, hey, tell me about this guy. Man, he walked the dog every day. He was washing his car. He gave me a jar of sugar over the fence. We would talk. He was a great guy. And he killed everybody and himself. Those are spiritual attacks.
Yes.
And I don't know. I'm just blessed. I think that, a lot of my life I was like, why me? Like, man, can I catch a break? Like, really? And now I know why my life went that way. I got a lot of phone calls. Oh man, thank you. Listen, I'm nothing, dude. God gets the glory, but I will always be able to. And I said, look, I'll let you down. I'm a human. I'm a guy. I walk on water. I've got my own issues, and I still do. But I am extremely blessed. I'm extremely blessed, and if I can help you and I answer that call and I can go to you, I will. And I'll show you the way out of that hole. That's an important thing for guys like us. If you have been in that hole, what kind of a guy am I if I don't teach you how to get out of that hole?
Mm-hmm.
You can get out of that hole. You can. And mental health is not mental illness. That's a huge thing. Like, oh, you're gonna look at me different. I'm not gonna look at you different. There are people that have illnesses that have to be on certain medications and certain things, and it just is what it is. That's what they got dealt in life. But mental health is being stuck in traffic. Mental health are your daughters screaming at each other and you throwing a brick, a glass, or, it just is what it is. And so I think that why didn't I do it? Because God is great and He had another plan. I'm not always going to have all the answers, but that's it. From that day, people are like, hey, did you go here? Did you go there? I said, I never touched alcohol again. I didn't, so that's it.
Did you just stop cold turkey or did you get help?
I went to therapy. I remember my wife and I went to therapy, and she looked at my wife and go, I don't need to see you. And I go, I need to see him. And we sat there for months. I would go and see her, and we're still in contact, and we talk to each other. And yeah, I didn't go through that, but I did after my alcohol. I started the pills, and that's what ended with that. And when I ended up in ICU, there was a little window at Baptist looking outside, and he's like, hey, how long are we going to do this?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I get the message. And that's it. So,
JC, what led you to create 3 a.m. Fog?
so not this past Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving before, I got a phone call of a detective that worked with me in Kendall who was, and I never use the word sweet to describe a guy because I don't go that way, but he was a sweet guy, right? And he had issues, and he's like, I remember he was like, how did you know? And I go, dude, I picked you off a long time ago. I go, it's okay. I was there. He goes, really? I go, yep. Are you doing this, that, the other? Yep. How did you know? And I go, yeah, because that's what I did. And so we developed a relationship. And I remember one time I sent him to detox, and and he was in a struggle, for whatever reason. And so I got a phone call. This was after I retired, and it said, hey, so and so passed away, right? And I went to the funeral. I went to the viewing, and I remember driving through and seeing the SRT guys, the SWAT guys, and everybody's like, oh, with the sleeves, and yeah, I'm gonna be macho. And I went inside, and everybody, loved this guy and just standing around, and the only one crying was his mother. I'm like, man, there's something wrong with this shit, you know. And I left there, and I came home and told my wife, I go, not on another day, not another day. And I put the phone here in my office and started talking. And the followers started chiming in, and hey, I'm with you. I thought I was alone. It happens to me. I get it. Male, female, homicide, road. Hey, this happened to me. I keep seeing that. I can't drink. I had a guy the other day who used to train my son. He's a new firefighter in another department. And he goes, man, he told me flat out, he goes, I thought you were like full of shit. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, you talked about all this alcohol and all this stuff. And I'm like, shh, this guy's got problems. He goes, I'm drinking Monday nights. I'm drinking Tuesday nights. 7 a.m. when I get off after we're done washing the truck, I need a beer. I need alcohol. And I go, you're running towards that. Get help now. You're not in the hole. You're in a little speed bump. Get help. And so he caught himself, and he's talking to somebody, but it's there. It's there,
Well, we are incredibly grateful, JC, that you started 3 AM Fog. We're incredibly grateful for your openness. Carolyn, I love that he has a relationship with Alex too.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you guys did VMAs together. That's important.
Well, I didn't. Let me correct that. I didn't do it with Alex, but we have so many mutual friends. And I remember a friend showed me the other day at my friend's house a picture of him and Alex in the back of the truck. He was, hey, you don't remember him from the MAS? And I go, man, I don't know if he went before me. I mean, I go back and I serve every year because I do believe in that. Mm-hmm. And I go, no, I don't remember. He goes, yeah, he was there. So we have all the mutual friends, and but he's still my brother. And so, when I heard that, everybody has so many great things about him, and it's just very sad, and I'm sorry that happens. But listen, like I said today, we need to learn from these things. I believe that Alex and Gustin and Kinsey and Andrew, from where they're at now, they can help us.
Yes.
But we are the ones that have to apply that.
Right.
Let's stop with the, hey, if he's giving away things or if he's distant, we already know that.
Right.
Those are the side effects. Why are we allowing them to get to that point? I know that if I look at a guy, and I can tell you that I can look at somebody's face and see trauma. I know it. And I call these people and I check on them at least once a week. Why are we getting to that point? Why don't we have better things? When Samoano was killed, we needed rifles. We got rifles. When OJ killed Nicole, we started caring about domestic violence,
right.
And so forth. Rin, when tourists were getting robbed, we did that. We can do it, but you got to care. I don't want to hear anything else from commissioners or chiefs. That's bullshit. I don't want to hear it. Do it.
Right.
Just do it.
There's a reason why there's a saying, actions speak louder than words.
That's it. Don't tell me you love me, show me.
It's that simple. JC, thank you so much. I look forward to collaborating with you more in the future.
You guys, and for anybody that needs it, always. You'll never get a no from me.
Awesome. And here's your reminder, if you see something, to sound the alarm.
Save a life.
Yes. God bless you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.